you talked about subtle body. So again, sharing with our viewers that, you know, we have consider probably 3 or maybe 4 bodies. So, you know, this environment is our body, this environment, and then we have this the physical body that people, you know, we see the physical body. And then beyond that physical body is the body that you talked about, subtle, we don't really see, but that's where the mind, intellect, and ego is. It's like your, you know, in a computer system, the CPU that's there that makes these decisions. And then beyond that is our spirit or soul that we don't really see, but it's the presence is always there. And what yoga does is actually it helps us in all those levels. So for example, and I've used this example before, is where people who you know, show up for practice yoga, and if they really are aware of the environment or connected with the environment, you know, when they leave the yoga studio, they really are carrying the practice through the day. It's not they just show up and do the practice and do the best practice, and once they leave that room, they're still defaulting. Of course, there's always room where if we are evolving, that you're not living and in a reactive way and, you know, rushing out, and then you have just sort of lost that essence. It's again being able to integrate those practices. And then when you're in that practice is how often when you're doing a pose, whatever the pose of breathing, being that witness and being that having that awareness of how often you are not really present. You are either thinking about the past or the future, that you have lost that moment, but really allowing yourself to remember that, come back to the practice. Because we all do that. We start thinking about the past or the future, and that really is to come back into that present and being in that practice, in that pose, or whatever that pose is being facilitated
so
with.
In your breath,
that's right.
In your body,
that's right.
Connect on the earth, connected to the heavens.
So that's the most important part about the yoga, not the number of poses you may have done, but your connection with the breath and staying with that flow. That's the most important part about the yoga practice, is being present in it. And often we think, and again, you know, we talk about that. You mentioned the word compassion earlier, and that judgment. When we are there, and that's why yoga teachers will invite you to close your eyes often in certain practices, is really going about inward, because when we open the eyes, we are watching what others are doing and we think we need to do like them, or we need to do a pose we may not be doing correctly. The critical part of us comes out thinking we're not doing it correctly. And that invitation to close the eyes and going inward really allows us to really connect to ourselves and having that compassion and no judgment about our practice.
So that's what yoga is. Yoga is a deep bungee dive inward. So that, you know, the universal movements is outward, the external world, and inward. So it really helps us establish that to be anchored inside ourselves, grounded, centered, and balanced inside ourselves, so that we don't do yoga, we become yoga.
That's right.
And we begin to live yoga. And then our choices, the choices that we make, our actions become, just by the very nature of who we are being, become our actions, we spontaneously become loving. We have loving action, spontaneous loving action.
And I know that you also facilitate some women's groups, circle groups, and some retreats. Talk a little bit about those groups. What is it about? Is it specific women's group, you know, with trauma, or anyone is able to come, or is it a number of weeks?
So I do like day-long workshops at the moment. I'm working toward putting together retreats, and also like a six-week program, 6 to 8 week program. And you know, it's interesting that you say, is trauma involved? I think at the end of the day, you know, we have all experienced some level of trauma.
Yes.
And so this is, you know, like, you know, people that live a regular life and they're in the office, they're a lawyer, they're a hairdresser, they're a teacher, they still struggle with self-hatred, different addictions, different problems in life, relational problems, financial problems. And so it's a sacred circle or setting that is confidential. Whatever is said there stays there. But it's an opportunity for people to be in community and to express what's going on for them. And I do different practices, different yogic practices, different psycho-spiritual practices to, again, help people to come back to self, to ground it in the now, and to know that they're not alone, to ask for help if they need it, and to also, through the practices, begin to develop their own practices so that they can begin to make different choices and help themselves take responsibility for their own life.